Hi, my name is Jordan Richard, and this is my biography speech. Gloria Steinem was born on March 25th, 1934, in Toledo, Ohio. She didn't attend grade school until she was 11 years old on a regular basis because her father was an antique dealer and they had to travel around from state to state all throughout the year. Didn't have a permanent home. So it wasn't until her parents split up when she was 11 years old that she started going regularly. And until then, she craves the normalcy of a grade school, but she grew to appreciate it as she got older that she didn't have this experience because she felt as though she missed out on what she calls the brainwashing period, where you kind of are taught gender roles rather than come into them yourselves. So she graduated high school and attended Smith College, where she studied government, and this was a really unique choice for a woman of her age in the 50s, since government was a very male-dominated industry at the time. She got her degree in 1956 and then was given the opportunity to go to India and study and research for the Independent Research Service, where she established a career as a freelance writer, and this is where she gains most of her recognition today. That's how she's mostly known. So today she continues to advocate for women's rights through writing and informative documentaries that examine domestic and global issues, and she actually has a show on Viceland currently called Woman, where she travels from different countries and examines different micro issues within those countries that have to do with women's rights. So she's had many achievements. She's written countless pieces and demonstrated countless speeches that have inspired women, males, anyone throughout her life. And she actually has been a monumental figure in women's liberation. She was a big speaker during the time of the women's rights movements of the 60s and 70s, and she brought attention to women's liberation being a social issue rather than just a women's issue. She inspired women to be educated and stand their ground and use their voice, and she wanted them to just do all of this to achieve fair treatment and they deserve and have been historically deprived of both inside and outside of the workplace. In 1963, she went undercover as a waitress or a bunny at the Playboy Mansion for Show magazine, and she actually wrote a political column that turned into an expose explaining all of the different corruption that was going on within that house, within that environment, and all the different objectification and kind of putting meaning behind it. And she told women why it matters to them and why they should care. So she also helped create the National Women's Caucus in 1971 alongside some other feminist leaders like Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan. And this is a multi-partisan organization that still exists today, and it's dedicated to increasing the female presence in politics. And it trains and supports pro-choice women candidates for office at all levels of government. And I think this is very, very important today, especially. We can be very fortunate to have her because of that. She also helped launch the feminist magazine titled Ms., just MS, in the same year. This magazine actually tackled feminist issues and brought to light the causes and effects of domestic abuse. In 1986, she was diagnosed and overcame breast cancer on top of everything else that was going on in her life, and she continued to persevere through that and fight for women's rights. And she also wrote a book called Revolution from Within, a book of self-esteem, which she published in 1992. And this received a lot of negative backlash because it had a huge focus on personal development. And many women thought this was a retreat from social activism, and they scrutinized her for it. So she responded by saying, "We need to be long-distance runners to make a real social revolution. And you can't be a long-distance runner unless you have some inner strength." And she followed up by saying that it was the most political thing she's ever written, and that she was saying many institutions are designed to undermine our self-authority in order to get us to obey their authority. So really introducing the idea of institutionalism and just the way that women have been treated unfairly because of that in terms of pay and sexual violence and whatever else. So she released a lot of other writings that gained a lot of recognition and were monumental to women proceeding in society in terms of liberation. So she was not only an activist, but a prophet of her time, and this is why I admire her so much. She was not scared to use her voice at a time when so many people were, and she gave a reason behind tragedy. She actually would go and dig through the micro issues behind them and their micro issues, such as racism, violence and poverty until she found an actual solution to the problem that she could present to the world. And she would share this no matter what the consequences would be. So she's been very fearless and selfless and selfish at the same time, and been a huge influence to the way I live my life, and has influenced me to use my voice and know my worth as a woman in today's society. So yeah, she's shown me as like a capable human, that education is as much of a responsibility as it is a privilege, and that I must be appreciative of this and use it to grow personally, and also share it with the world in a positive way. So Gloria Steinem continues to use this platform to fight for women's rights, especially on the topics of evenly distributed respect in the household and reproductive freedom. In conclusion, she's been quoted saying, "The idea of retiring to me is as foreign as the idea of hunting." So in other words, she'll continue to fight for our freedoms until her last day, and inspires us to do the same.